Absolutely. I mean, the book started off as another way to communicate common sense ideas, right? And we weren't always hearing that from the beginning. The book itself, the goal of it is to lay out how we got here, because that's the important part, right, of a lot of these leftist ideologies that sound fantastic 20 years ago, and here we are sitting where kids are walking over heroin needles to get to school. That doesn't make sense to me. But what the book specifically is looking for is how we got here, what laid the foundation to where we're at today, and then what are the lowest hanging fruit solutions that we can come up with. I think a lot of men our age, in our generation, don't have community, right? We don't have that group of people and like-minded men that we can push together and try to be better versions of ourselves. But nonetheless, finding like-minded men is an incredibly important part.
Yeah.
If you look at, some of the rates of suicide in men, incredibly alarming, right? But if I think we can help alleviate some of that pressure of what guys our age are facing and what they're feeling. They're feeling lost. They're feeling that they don't have that tribe. If we can come together and create organizations like Young Republicans, like a church, like a community, that's a tribe. That's your tribe. And we just need to find more of that today.
Alrighty, we are recording. Welcome everyone to the San Diego Patriots podcast. This is episode 26.
Congrats.
Appreciate it. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Mr. Cole Marting. How you doing?
Doing well. And it's so great to get to know each other after we met a couple weeks ago now.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, of course, the last discussion I did was with Cynthia, president of the San Diego Young Republicans, and the two of you were kind enough to invite a group of strangers to your home and watch the debate together. So, how did you join that club?
Man, it's a long story. Really, my start in politics. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I always loved and appreciated folks who could lead. Right? Always attracted to leaders. It's not an easy thing to do. And you find a lot of them in politics, a lot of good ones and a lot of bad ones. But what I noticed growing up is that, some of the best politicians were really, really good leaders. And so really followed it from the beginning, went to school and studied political science because I just couldn't get enough of it. And then made my way out to Washington, D.C. to chase that dream, right? Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to go out in D.C. and change the world.
Yeah.
I found
born and raised in San Diego, right?
I was.
Yeah.
So I was born up in Oregon, but quickly moved down here to San Diego when we were 3 years old. And like most families, chasing a dream, chasing a job, that's what my dad was doing.
Yeah.
So when we came back from DC, came back to San Diego because, we had roots here and I wanted to really settle down. I got married to my wife, which was fantastic. And then I realized, throughout this entire process that I didn't really have a community. I didn't have a group of people that were like-minded who could see things the same way. That's tough for a young conservative, right? Especially
in California.
Especially in this state.
Yeah.
San Diego's pretty good. So is Orange County. Man, it would be a lot worse if we were up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But I found that, hey, I need a community. And so we started building one and restarting the chapter here in San Diego of Young Republicans. And from there, we just started putting on events and putting on groups and organizations where people could come together, watch the debate like we got to together, and enjoy it, have fun, communicate about what it means to be a young conservative in today's society.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm someone who is, very concerned about, where California's gone over the past few years and also where America has gone and just culture in general, right?
Right.
We're noticing worse mental health for children, higher suicide rates, higher depression, anxiety, you name it, lack of purpose. People don't want to work, people don't want to find a career and get their shit together. Like, what the hell is going on, right? So I'm someone, regardless of your politics, just interested in individuals and groups that take the time to contribute to the community and try to offer a better path. So that was one of the main reasons I was interested in talking to you, and really just what motivates you to want to get into politics, let alone conservative politics, being in California.
It's always an interesting concept and an interesting path. But when we really get down to it, I think a lot of men our age, in our generation, don't have community.
Yeah.
And other folks call it tribe. Right? We don't have that group of people and like-minded men that we can push together and push and try to be better versions of ourselves. right? And part of that is with young Republicans. Obviously, it's not just men; it's a lot of women as well. But nonetheless, finding like-minded men is an incredibly important part.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the rates of suicide in men, incredibly alarming, right? But if I think we can help alleviate some of that pressure of what guys our age are facing and what they're feeling, they're feeling lost, they're feeling that they don't have that tribe. If we can come together and create organizations like Young Republicans, like a church, like a community. If you're going to play pickleball with a group of dudes on the weekend, that's a tribe. That's your tribe.
Yeah.
And we just need to find more of that today.
Yeah, and that's really like me as an American and as a man myself. I graduated college. I hustled as hard as I could to find a career that I like. I love my career and my profession in software sales.
Yeah.
Something we have in common. But over the course of the past few years, I was like, okay, man, I have a good career that I like my relationship. I have a good relationship with my parents. But man, I just kind of feel like I'm lacking something. And that's really where I started to get into, Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
I'm a big advocate of Jordan Peterson and his philosophy on life. But something that he talks about is, yes, you need to find your purpose as a man. Once you achieve that, you also need to find something bigger than yourself. That's why a lot of people join the military and get fulfillment out of it. That's why a lot of people find communities or gyms or, whatever it may be. And that's where, one, I started the podcast, and two, I started to look for these communities of like-minded men and women that, share my ideas and, something where I can talk to other people and, get out of my cave of working virtual and all that stuff. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. So why conservative politics? I mean, like I was born and raised in San Diego as well. California, I think we are conservatives are outnumbered 1-4, 1-5, compared to liberals or progressives. Which those terms kind of bleed together these days.
They do.
But it kind of seems like you're the outlier as a conservative. So like, what made you want to get into that, and how did you stay so tough in this world?
It wasn't easy. Back in high school, I really enjoyed trap shooting with my dad. And didn't view it as shooting guns per se. I viewed it as, hey, this is a hobby I get to do with my dad. No different than if you're working on a motorcycle or, playing catch out back, right? It doesn't matter. We were just having a hobby together. I was 17 at the time and noticed that there was this weird group of folks up in this town called Sacramento that were trying to take away my ability to go trap shooting with my dad. And I didn't understand it at first, right? I was like, okay, I get it. I'm using a shotgun, but I'm locking it up. I'm traveling with it safely. All the right things that we want to do as safe gun owners. And so I started looking into it, and I'm like, what's going on with this group up of weirdos up in the swamp of Sacramento? And it turned out that they were trying to take away my ability as someone under the 18 to purchase and utilize a firearm, especially a long gun like a shotgun. And so I dove into it. I did my research. That's where it all starts for most of us. We find something. Most of the time, we're not searching for politics.
Yeah.
Politics finds us.
Totally.
And that's where it found me. I realized at 17 that there was a group of liberals and a group of conservatives. And then there was a few parties in between that align roughly with those ideologies. And so I started searching, all right, who wants to keep my ability to have a hobby with my dad and who wants to take it away? Quickly learned, there's Republicans, there's Democrats, there's independents. In fact, in the state right now, Republicans are making a turnaround, which is very nice. Mm-hmm. Just a few years ago, we were actually the third largest party here in the state, which is embarrassing. Democrats,
I didn't know that.
independents, then Republicans. Horrible. We've turned that around now. More and more people are registering as Republicans. We're now the second largest party in the state, second to Democrats.
Yeah.
But that's how I got into it. It's not something I was searching out. It really found me. From then on, registered Republican, strong conservative, believing in individual freedoms and the ability to pursue a life that you want to build yourself. And I think that's what can unite a lot of people across the country.
Yeah, it's almost, and I always joke about this, but, 12, 13 months ago, I couldn't tell you what a Democrat or Republican was because I didn't care about politics like most people our age.
Yeah.
But, as I started to, again, get into Jordan Peterson, I'm someone who, my mother was a refugee who fled Vietnam to the fall of communism. I know that communism's bad. Like, I didn't want communism in my society. That's how I started to get into this and try to understand, like, why are people advocating for that? Like, so many people died in the 1900s because of this ideology, which isn't just a top-down ideology. It's actually, both top-down and bottom-up. You have your groups of citizens who think, wait, we want equality for all. Like, let's, change this and change that, and take, restricting your freedoms is actually good for everyone else. Like, you're in the way of our utopia. No. So that's how I got into it. But, Republican, Democrat aside, as I started to, get into this research and content, I came across people like Thomas Sowell and even Larry Elder, who I'm a huge Larry Elder fan. I love this guy. And again, I didn't even know what a Republican was. I just listened to these guys and I'm like, everything they're saying makes sense to me. Like, it sounds like these ideas will help promote better mental health, lower gas prices, grocery prices, and crime rates. Like, hey, I'm on these guys' team. You know what I mean?
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where, the older generation is doing a great job in conservatism. They're talking about it. They're on talk radio. They're on television. They're doing a fantastic job. What I'm starting to see with podcasts like yours is a younger generation of common sense rising up, right, and talking and communicating.
Yeah.
I was recently reading about John Adams, right, and some of what he did in his lifetime. A great communicator, and he fought via words, right, writing. That's something that I've really adopted myself as a young conservative, is saying, hey, we got to get our message out, right? It's the only way we can win. Yeah. It's the only way we can turn around not only San Diego, but this state as well. If people don't know why we think the way we do, if we can't break it down for them, there's no chance we can push away communism and socialism and all these terrible isms that are seeming to take over our society. And so what I can tell young men, what I can tell young conservatives, talk. Spread what you believe. Talk about it.
Stand up for what you believe in.
That's right. That's all we got to do. Yeah. And if we can continue to do that, I think we'll start to win over friends. I think we'll definitely win over our family. But more importantly, our neighbors and our coworkers as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and, in addition to Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, who I think do a good job at communicating these ideas, we also have someone like Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm a huge advocate of Vivek Ramaswamy, just in terms of him being a younger guy. He's a millennial, right? Someone who was, 38, running for president, came out of absolutely nowhere, was a CEO and ran multi-billion-dollar companies, lived the American dream. His parents were Indian immigrants, here in America. They also love this country. And so that was something that I resonated with. But again, put a socialism aside, Democrat, Republican, the ideas that he's saying, do we want better mental health, or do we want to make everything about race and sex? And it's like, I think we're tired of that. Like, this social justice, ideology, which in my view and from the research I've done is just the latest manifestation of communism.
It is.
It really is. And so again, I agree with what you're saying in terms of, conservatives need to offer a better vision, especially to the younger generation, who I think is in deep trouble if we continue down the path that we are. And I'd love your opinion on this, but something that I've noticed through my research is, politics seems to be, swings, as they say, the pendulum swings both ways, right? Like, maybe 20 years ago, the Republican Party was, trying to censor and do all this stuff. So everyone thought, oh, they're the bad party, whatever. Here we are in starting in 2012, in my view, you have this kind of social justice ideology, and now we've really started to see where that goes, and the peak of that with the Democrats censoring social media, their political opponents, with the whole gender affirming care is absolutely insane. So all this stuff, I think hopefully we've hit a peak, and I really cross my fingers that the next 20 years, we're going to have a right-wing government and swing back the other way, where people love their country. People love the old school ideas of autonomy, hard work, community, family, church. I grew up fairly secular, but I think church is good. Yeah. I think that communities need that. So would love your perspective on kind of that idea or concept of the pendulum swinging both ways.
Man, to beat the left, you have to appreciate what they're good at.
Yeah.
They are brilliant at branding and marketing their ideas. Look no further than DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sounds great. Double thumbs up if I just hear those three words. But then we see the results of them, where you're hiring people based on what they look like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? I want to hire the best person possible with the best brain and the best work ethic. I could care less what you look like, what your name is, whatever's going on in your house. I could care less. I just want to hire the best person for it, right? And DEI, I think, is the latest version of everything that you're talking about. We saw that, with the Secret Service, and there's a lot of communication about that maybe we're not hiring the best folks to do the jobs that are necessary. But that's happening all across, college campuses as well. If DEI is so important to college campuses, we're not getting the best professors in the world. We're getting professors based on what they look like or their race or their ethnicity or whatever. I could care less what my professor looks like. I just want them to be really, really good at teaching me so I can go off and have a successful life and go get a great job and provide for my family and build up a community. I think
just like surgeons and pilots.
Oh, man.
Right?
You're spot on with that. You're spot on. I want the best people possible for the roles that they're going to enter. And DEI is just the perfect example of a path that we've gone the wrong way on. But I think that's changing. That narrative is changing today. We weren't really hearing about this, like you said, back in 2012. There's a big push for not only DEI, but other really socialist kind of pushing narratives as well, right? Equality of outcome instead of equality of the start. And I think we can all believe that we're better off if we have an equal footing at the beginning and we push as hard as we can and we end up where we end up, right? That's the right way to do it. But over the next 20 years, I think we can swing a little bit more into the common sense direction. But again, we're going to have to communicate it. We're going to have to explain why these programs don't work, why hiring based on someone's ethnicity does not make sense. Otherwise, we'll continue to push in this bad direction because the left is really good at what they do, really good at marketing and language and branding their ideas. They're absolutely brilliant. If you look at the way that bills are titled in Congress, every single one of them I would vote for just off the title, right? But when you dive into the actual nitty-gritty and the details of each one of those bills, man, half of them don't make sense. But they're really, really good at branding.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I always bring up the example of affirmative action, right?
Yeah.
So if you talk to Joe Schmo on the street and you're like, hey, do you support affirmative action? They're like, oh, affirmative action, like that's just helping, black people and minorities get into school. Like, of course I support that. I want the best for them. And it's like, okay, well, in my view, affirmative action is like, yes, I as well would love to see more black surgeons and, people in positions of power, but not at the expense of meritocracy. And not if we have to lower the standards for them, just like we were talking about with DEI. So, affirmative action sounds great on the surface, like most communist and socialist ideologies. But would you still support, me talking to Joe Schmo on the street, would you still support affirmative action if it meant discriminating against whites and Asians? And they're like, well, no, I don't think we should discriminate against anyone. It's like, well, then affirmative action isn't for you, my friend.
Exactly.
And I had one of my friends who's a black guy. I was talking to him about affirmative action and, he feels the same way. He's like, I mean, it kind of, I don't want to be belittled and I don't want people to lower standards for me. And it's like, we have it pretty good around here and I don't need any handouts. Like, I actually think that that's not good for my fellow black people. You know what I mean? So I agree with you. I think that, the tide is turning a little bit. Hopefully we won't get too optimistic, but my fingers are crossed for the future. So I do want to bring up your book.
Yeah.
Right? So California's toughest challenges and the common sense conservative ways to solve them. Absolutely love the idea and the concept, and I appreciate people who write their ideas and communicate their ideas out. But as a fellow Californian, I'm fearful of the future of our state. I am no fan of Gavin Newsom. I think that he's done a lot of horrific things. I think that homelessness has gotten a lot worse. Crime's out of control with this whole, $900 limit and you don't go to jail, let alone the open border, right? Absolutely insane. And when I've had conversations with my fellow Californians, even when we think about something like homelessness, right? So homelessness, we see people on the street. If I talk to Joe Schmo, they say, well, I don't want to force anyone to go into any care or force anyone, if they have a rough condition, Sure, I totally get that. But what are the consequences of that? Like, who do we prioritize? The mom and pop restaurant who is doing everything legally and trying to grow and stimulate the community and donates money to local, children and groups and all this stuff, or the guy who's shooting heroin into his veins, shitting his pants right in front of their shop and deflecting customers from going into the business. So it's well intended, just like most socialist ideologies,
They are.
but they end up having a very nasty consequence. So would love to hear more about your book,
Yeah.
why you wrote it, what it's about, and what you would love people to take away from it.
Absolutely. I mean, the book started off as another way to communicate common sense ideas, right? And we weren't always hearing that from the beginning. The book itself, the goal of it is to lay out how we got here, because that's the important part, right, of a lot of these leftist ideologies that sound fantastic 20 years ago, and here we are sitting where kids are walking over heroin needles to get to school. That doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it does to some on the left, doesn't to me. But what the book specifically is looking for is how we got here, what laid the foundation to where we're at today, and then what are the lowest hanging fruit solutions that we can come up with. A great example, is with our fire mitigation. We're sitting here right now in Bonsall, huge fire area. In fact, the lilac fire ripped through here, and as a result, left high insurance premiums. A lot of homes were destroyed, etc. And so how do we go ahead and fix that solution of wildfires ripping through the West, right? It's Oregon, it's Idaho, it's Washington, it's here, especially in California. How do we fix that solution? Let's just clean up our land. Let's just manage our land, right? Let's take care of what God gave us and make sure it's clear so that we can protect our homes and protect our communities. That seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit, common sense solution to me. But no one's talking about it. Right? No one's bringing that up. And so it's ideas like that were scattered throughout the book about solutions to water infrastructure, right? Maybe instead of investing in a high-speed rail, we should just improve our aqueducts around the state, right? And we won't be in a drought every 3 to 5 years. Maybe we shouldn't be letting all the water that does come in the rainy months just wash out, to the ocean. That seems common sense to me. When it comes to the homeless issue, I think we're in a situation right now where we've tried the Housing First initiative, right? And for those that aren't familiar, Housing First is all about if we can just put a homeless person in some sort of facility, some sort of house, that'll solve the problem, right? Because the problem is that they don't have a house. I don't believe that has succeeded. I think we can look at our streets, especially here in North County, and see that has not worked. Housing has to be paired with mandatory help, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people could come to that conclusion as well. If we're going to put someone in a house, if we're going to provide them that at tax dollar expenses, you and I are paying for it, right? And I think generally speaking, we could agree, hey, we want to take care of these people and get them on a path to success instead of where they're at right now. If we can get them into a facility where they're getting rehab, they're getting the mental help they need, they're getting the physical help they need, they're getting the ability to take a shower and have a roof over their head so that they can go jump to a job interview and succeed, man, that sounds common sense to me. And we talk through all that. We talk education. In the book, I talk about homelessness and water scarcity, wildfire mitigation, etc. But it's a very simple read. And that was the goal of it. I didn't want this to be, a 500-page book where someone going, oh, geez, I don't want to open that thing. It's a very simple read, and it just breaks down all the common sense solutions to, the biggest problems here in California.
Yeah, I love it. And as a Californian, I appreciate the work that you're doing. And you mentioned education. So education is something that, hey, I went to public school here in California, whatever, wasn't too bad, wasn't too good. I didn't really think much of it. I was a goofy little kid, right? Who would? But something that I've noticed a growing presence of these days, and I always talk about Marxism and this whole social justice ideology, which I think has really infiltrated the K through 12 education, especially in the public schools, through critical race theory, through whatever it may be. And there was a book that I read last year called "When Race Trumps Merit." I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's the author's name is Heather McDonald. She may be a professor. I can't remember right now. But she wrote a book about how in places like California, we have this ideology of okay, well, if certain let's say black students aren't doing as well on the SAT. Well, that's not because they aren't doing their homework. That's not because they are, whatever it may be. It's because the SAT is racist. It's
right.
Like, okay, well, hold on here. Like, wait a sec. And okay, well, we look at how, students are performing on math. Okay, hey, Asian kids are doing pretty good. White kids doing also pretty good. Black kids maybe aren't doing as well. Well, it's not that there's some problem with, again, them doing their homework or, better expectations, whatever it may be. It's that math is racist. It's like, okay, these are kind of pretty insane ideas that we're hearing here. And she talks about how in the state of California in recent years, we have about 75% of black 12th graders who cannot read at a 12th grade level. And it's like, okay, like that's not good, right? If we really want to help the black community, shouldn't we help them get better educated, hold higher standards, whatever it may be, not just, okay, well, you don't have to test in math anymore. You don't have to learn English anymore. And she wrote in the book how there's these ideas such as hard work and punctuality that's a white person thing. So like that's racist if we try to teach that as an idea to young black students. And again, here's this perverse, backwards idea of they say they're leading with compassion, but these ideas are going to completely destroy the black community and keep a lot of them in poverty and all this stuff. It's like it's crazy. So would love to hear your perspective on education and kind of how that's declined over the past 20 years, let's say.
I'll tell you a story. So my best man in my wedding, a great human being. He originally wanted to get into education. He was inspired by his teachers in high school, and so he started teaching in high school in the same high school that he went to. Over in Carlsbad. And during this whole process, he realized that there were some students, naturally, that struggled, right? And there's always going to be some students that are struggling in the classroom. I think that's just how things go. But he wanted to put some extra effort into these students. And he realized that, hey, maybe some of them didn't have either the reading ability or the math ability to move on to the next grade. And so he would petition to say, hey, I would love to hold this student back for another year so that we can make sure the next time that they move up in a grade, they can succeed. Mm-hmm. The district doesn't like that. Admin doesn't like that because that is a strike against them if you go ahead and hold back a student.
More failures on their resume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in reality, we're helping a student succeed. And so this is a great example of our education system being messed up by the metrics that we're judging, school districts from and classrooms from. I think if we can give more autonomy to the teachers themselves, to the districts themselves, and have less control at the state level, we'll see more of, hey, let's hold back the students that need some extra help. Maybe let's give some extra time and education to the students that need the most help. Let those students that are succeeding move on and push themselves hard and continue to go through the system. But something else that I saw, especially here in North County, San Diego, you had to go to college. You had to go to a four-year university if you were going to, quote unquote, succeed. I don't believe that's the case. And I think that narrative of pushing kids when they're 13, 14, 15 years old to say, hey, you are going to have to go to college, otherwise life isn't going to be so great for you. I think that's totally wrong, right? And so look at our education system and say, hey, there are multiple paths to succeed in life. And we need a diverse population. We need them going to school and to a university, but we also need them going straight into a workforce straight out of college. Hey, if you can get an apprenticeship where you're getting paid and you're learning a trade, man, I can't think of a better situation. Hey, we need more people joining the military. You talk about a problem that we're having in the country right now. Recruitment is down significantly by every single metric possible. We're pushing people towards a direction that makes the parents look like they've succeeded versus what the student and what the child actually needs to succeed in our education system. It's a mess, Lee. Yeah. It is an absolute mess.
Fluffed results, right?
Oh, man, it's bad.
Yeah. And I mentioned again Thomas Sowell. So Thomas Sowell in an interview he did, the interviewer asked him, hey, if you were to offer one piece of advice to a young black man in America, what would it be? And he said, well, go develop skills that someone's willing to pay for.
Brilliant idea.
Genius, right?
Yeah.
Right? So, hey, if you want to go to college, go to college. You don't have to. Go be a plumber. Go be I did a video on tattoo artists.
Yep.
Like, hey, I love tattoos, right? It's a great art. It's a great skill set. Many of the ones that I've met come from dirt poor families. They go get an apprenticeship where they're, cleaning the shop. They're doing, the dirty grunt work while throughout the day they're learning skills, and then eventually they can go build their own business. I mean, my tattoo artist who I've known for years, the guy makes probably $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy, right?
Does he own the business?
He does, yeah. So
There you
originally he was, an artist working at a shop, started to build his own book of business. I met him when he had 5,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Now he has 500,000, right?
Yeah.
So he makes good money. He owns his own shop. He's got multiple artists underneath him. The guy could retire if he wants. It's crazy.
Yeah.
He was born in 92. It's insane. So, but that's just one example, right? Learn a skill set. You're not going to be good in the beginning. Everyone's, if you're learning how to be a plumber, you're going to screw up a couple times, but that's part of life and that's part of being a man. What you can't do is just complain and say that the world owes me stuff and, I don't need to work. I don't need to take on responsibilities. Like, that's a horrific idea and will, in fact, lead you to living in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go be a plumber. Go into construction. Go be a tattoo artist. Go be a chef. Like, doesn't matter. Pick something. And this was my original podcast name, was The American Pursuit of Excellence.
Right.
Because regardless of what situation you're in, pursue excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, pick a direction. Do the grunt work. Do the dirty work. Figure it out. You will eventually find success. So
You're spot on. And I think so many young men, especially in middle school, high school, they're kind of lost, right? And we need to just, as older men, as potential role models to these folks, let's go ahead and let's just explain that, hey, whatever you decide to do in life, go be fantastic at it, right? Whatever it is, if you want to go be a star athlete, man, pursue that with every single bone in your body. If I look at myself as someone who wants to improve the community around me, I do that every single morning. I wake up and think of ways that I can go ahead and improve the community around me. But maybe that's not for you. Maybe you want to go be a small business owner. Go pursue that, my friend, right? But young men, we're just not hearing that. We're not hearing it as much. We're hearing all the negative, the whole world's against you. You're not going to succeed. Things are so tough to do. But what a beautiful example of someone who started off just being an artist and just having a passion for art to now being a business owner and succeeding. I can't think of anything more, American dream than that story right there.
Right. Yeah, and that reminds me of this whole notion of toxic masculinity, right?
Yeah.
So, we've been hearing more of that over the past few decades. And again, I think a lot of this chaos started in 2012, and that's really when social media came out. And social media, sure, the internet is great. Social media, it helps connect people around the world. But even before social media, a human phenomenon is lies and bad ideas tend to spread faster than good ideas and the truth, right? Social media really accelerated a lot of that. And hey, don't get me wrong. Are there toxic men out there? Of course. Have always been men who will beat their wives and terrible. We don't like that. We don't support that. Unfortunately, people have overcorrected and just assumed that any masculinity is toxic. Oh, well, being confident or being a hard worker or all this stuff, that's toxic. You don't want that. Just be a soft little baby, right? And it's what Jordan Peterson talks about, the concept of the devouring mother, right? The devouring mother, she wants her kid to be wrapped up in bubble wrap and to be a harmless, fly to where they can't do anything for themselves. And in reality, it's her wanting to feel purpose and feel need. Yeah. And it's like this crazy phenomenon, but curious your perspective on this whole toxic masculinity and where people get that wrong.
I think we're seeing a shift in it right now. I was just talking to my wife about this because it popped up on Instagram Reels. This whole idea of blue job and pink job, right? It's this idea that, hey, the blue job is to go hit the spider that's underneath the toilet and get it taken care of. And the pink job is to, add the extra pillows to the couch and make it beautiful, right? And it's kind of a joke, but the whole idea is that, hey, maybe there are gender roles in society. Maybe men are better at some things than women are. Maybe women are far better at other things than men are. And that is okay. And we should celebrate that instead of try to push it down. We're not made to be the same. God has made us in completely different bodies for a reason, with different interests and different skills. And I think that should be celebrated. So the idea of toxic masculinity, us men diving into the idea that we should celebrate being men, we should be strong men, we should be passionate men, we should be intelligent men, we should be men that pursue something greater than ourselves and bring up a community around us. I can't think of something more celebratory than that. But if the left wants to label that as toxic masculinity, they can do so. But we're going to continue to build a great society with strong, capable, fantastic men that are bringing up good families around them.
Yeah. You want to be the warrior in the garden, right? You
Exactly.
want to be a strong, fierce individual who chooses to keep himself tame for the betterment of society. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, right? Like the purpose of politics is for us to have dialogue to improve our society without violence.
Right.
Unfortunately, people live in their own little bubbles these days, and social media is one of the reasons for that. But, people, they see, the left as the enemy, or they see conservatives as their enemy, and, unfortunately cannot have a conversation with them without feeling attacked or feeling like, words are violence, and therefore I need to respond with violence, which it's an insanely dangerous idea. But and again, one of the reasons I'm doing the podcast is we need to have conversations to actually discuss what ideas are good and what ideas are bad. Because, hey, my sister is, more progressive and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't think she's a raging communist. You know what I mean? So we have conversations and, some of them are uncomfortable. But if you can't have a conversation with your own damn sister, like we have a problem, right?
You've lost.
You've lost, absolutely. So it's just interesting that you mentioned that. But so taking a step back, because I wanted to, when I was going through your website, I saw that you did, when you left San Diego, you went over to D.C. and then actually worked at the White House, right? Like, what was that journey like? And, what is that world of the federal government and that internship like?
Well, I say I went out there bright-eyed, bushy-tailed for a reason, right? Because the idea that you could go and pursue a career in D.C. and make a difference in the world, man, I can't think of anything more attractive. But when then you get there and you realize there's all these bureaucracies in the way and these systems, and hey, this is just the way it is, so we can't, fulfill this necessity to make our world better, it kind of beats you down, right? But I went out to D.C. in 2018, interned at the White House, and did the traditional White House internship program. If any of your listeners are thinking about pursuing, a role in the government or anything like that, highly recommend they apply. It's very simple. You just go on the website and apply. But thousands of people end up applying. Only, I think it's 50 to 150, something in that range, end up doing it. In fact, you can see our intern portrait right there.
Wow. With
President Trump. But what a wonderful experience. I learned a lot while I was there, but also learned that there's a lot broken, right? There's a lot broken in D.C. So I came back, finished up my school, and then, gave it one more shot and went out to D.C. In my final semester there, I was interning with Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who, later became Speaker of the House. Another photo of him and I right there. Beautiful portrait of Reagan in the background. But another fantastic experience to go out there and pursue. Hey, what does it look like to be a staffer on the Hill? What does it look like to work in the executive office building, in the White House? How does that go? What does the daily grind look like? Mm-hmm. I will say in DC, it's a fun place to work. You're in the center of it all. It's absolutely wonderful. Terrible place to live, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, man, what a bad place. You come back to San Diego, you have wonderful food, wonderful beaches, entertainment all around. There's a reason that the federal government is set up in D.C. Yeah. I'll tell you that. But I learned a lot while I was there and met some wonderful people. You talk about having a conversation with your sister who is on a different political ideology than you. What a wonderful place to go and do that, right? Because you have everyone in D.C. In fact, a lot of my friends at the time were very left-leaning progressives and liberals. We would still go out to brunch together. We would still hang out. We would still talk about, that boss that just sucks and you can't get over them, right? We would still have those conversations as people. And I think what we've lost today is the idea that we have so much more in common as Americans than we do differences.
Yeah.
Right? We're probably 90 to 95% similar with our ideology, with the way that we wake up in the morning. Everyone puts their shoes on one shoe at a time, right? We're so similar in so many ways, but we find just the littlest division to really separate us.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if, and I'm a believer that it is social media that is one of the main reasons that that's happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we've gotten soft as a society. Mm-hmm. And I think it is like Western civilization. I don't know if you've ever heard of Victor Davis Hanson. He's a professor over at Stanford. He may be retired now, but he's one of my go-to resources, and he's a military historian. But he talks about how Western civilization today is in this era of hyper-affluence, right? We've gotten soft over the years.
Right.
And I think it's because, one of the consequences of being soft is you're unable to deal with discomfort. So if you're dealing with someone who you're disagreeing with, you could just choose to not have a conversation with them. If I'm following all these, conservative folks on Instagram, I can just choose to not follow any of the, left-leaning sites and all this stuff. So you really get built up into your own little bubble, which I think isn't healthy and does kind of cause you to see the other person as the enemy. And, of course, about a week ago, there was the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which I'd love your perspective on. But first, what I've noticed even when I watch debates on Piers Morgan, right? You see certain progressives come on board and they're unable to say or to express any sympathy for an assassination attempt on a former president, whether you like him or not. And even the fact that, a fire chief was killed protecting his family, and they're either joking about it or have no sympathy for it. It's like, man, where have we gone if you truly do see people with different ideas as your enemy and do not care about their, have any regard for them, which is just crazy. But I'm curious, your perspective on the whole Trump assassination attempt and, how all that went.
It was hard for me to watch, truthfully.
Because you met the guy.
I've met the guy. I worked those rallies throughout my career. I worked at the Republican National Committee, and in the 2020 election cycle, we were basically in a joint team with the Trump campaign, right? It was basically one and the same. At the RNC, we would oversee a little bit more on the down ballot stuff, right? How can we help gubernatorial races? How can we help Senate races and key congressionals as well? But they had us a lot of times working these rallies. And so I would head out to Nevada and go work rallies in Reno. I would head up to New Hampshire and work rallies in Manchester. And it was very difficult for me. It's one of those situations where I think a lot of your listeners can agree, especially if they're a little bit older. You knew where you were on 9/11, and you will never forget it, right? I can remember I was very young at the time when 9/11 happened, but I still remember it. I remember my parents were getting the carpet cleaned that morning, and they got a call and said, "Hey, do you want me to still come over?" And my dad goes, "What do you mean you want me to still come over?" "Yes, come over." And he's like, "Are you watching the news?" And he turned it on. He's like, "Yeah, you should probably stay home. We're going to sit down and just take this in."
Yeah, attack on U.S. soil.
That's right. And I felt very similar to that way with the situation that happened just a week ago. I was heading downstairs on my way to go get a haircut, typical, weekend activity. And I get a call from my dad. And he goes, "Cole, what are you doing right now?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm on my way to go get a haircut, typical, weekend deal." And he goes, Are you watching the news? The president's just been shot." And at first I didn't know if he meant, former President Trump or President Biden. Either way, I was taken back by it because as an American, an attack on our democracy in that kind of way is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And it should not be taking place. So I didn't know if it was President Biden or President Trump at the time. Went ahead and turned on the news, and we're just seeing the clip play over and over, right? We're seeing that.
All the media sites covering it and all the angles, new information coming out every 10 minutes. It was wild.
And so I'm sitting there with chills rolling down my spine, watching, someone attempt the life on not only a former president, but the leading candidate right now in the presidential election, who could end up being the president of the United States very shortly here. And it just reminded me that evil exists in this world. There are monsters. It's a mean, nasty world. There's good people in it trying to change that. But man, evil exists. Evil's alive. And we saw that last weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is an example of how desperate some folks are. I won't group them all together.
Of course.
Some folks are to not have Donald Trump or even Republicans in the president role or even in these leadership roles, because and specifically with Donald Trump, they were censoring some of his campaign information, ads, all that stuff. They have been going after him in courts and putting a gag order on him. And now we're in a position where someone even tried to take his life. It's like, okay, hey, there's a lot of, toxic discussions going back and forth politically. But if you're an independent or someone who's in the middle or don't really care about politics, it's kind of obvious, like, man, they're really just doing anything possible, legal or not, sane or not, to prevent this guy from being in power. Like, what the hell are they hiding? That's kind of what I think about it.
And I believe a lot of people are in your position there, thinking, what is going on if we're in this situation where not only are we trying to hammer him in the courts, we're trying to, I won't say we, but someone attempted their life to take the president's life. And then you look at other situations where they're taking him off of social media, like you explained. They're throwing everything they can at this man, and he keeps popping back up and fighting. Man, what an American spirit that is. Yeah. Right? We as Americans, we've gone through 2 world wars. We were the first ones on the moon. We are an enormous, fantastic, diverse population of humans. We're some of the smartest people in the world. You look at the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, they're Americans.
Biggest economy.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And so you put all of this together. It's the American spirit. It's the pursuit of excellence, right? And we're seeing it right now with the leader on the Republican side, on the conservative movement. It feels good to be a Republican. Yeah. I will say that.
I thought it was super cool that Dana White, the owner of the UFC, has been getting more involved with talking about Trump. And even months ago, he was doing podcasts with people, right, where he's like, hey, I don't care about your damn politics. Mm-hmm. Like, do a good job at the product or the service that you provide. And he's like, and don't tell me what the fuck to say. He's like, I say whatever the hell I want. Yeah. And, people are, call it, I'm sure you've seen some clips on it, but I just think it's really interesting. One, that he's been more vocal about it. But 2, when we were talking earlier about, this whole toxic masculinity and we need young men to be stronger. We have noticed really UFC and mixed martial arts has really popped off in the past, 5 to 10 years. And, of course, Dana White's one person who's responsible for that, thankfully. But I think it's this hole that needed to be filled for, young men in terms of wanting to play rough and wanting to, see, not necessarily violence. I guess it is considered violence, but it's controlled violence. And, yes, I enjoy watching UFC fights. They're absolutely awesome. But I'm always impressed by these individuals who hustle their asses off at their skill set. They're the hardest workers in the room. They're, of course, the professional athletes, so they're very talented. But I love that this community is really, building up. And I think it's just interesting to see how, that community and role in young men's lives kind of fuse with Donald Trump. And it's almost like coming full circle and here in America. But I'm curious your thoughts on that.
It's always fun, right? I grew up, I was a wrestler back in high school. And, similar to many other martial arts, you're taught, and one of the best coaching, strategies is to just beat you down, right? Pair the weakest guy in the room with the lowest skill set against the strongest guy in the room that's been doing it for years, right? And who learns the most in that situation? Well, it's the newbie, right? He learns, man, not only do I have a lot to learn here in the future and I know nothing, but I can strive to be that good. I can get beaten down hard, right? I can in wrestling you get pinned. I can get pinned over and over and over and over again in a few seconds at a time. But the next time I come in and jump on the mat next week, I'm going to last a few more seconds. Mm-hmm. And then the week after that and months after that, and I'm going to get better. man, what a perfect parallel to life's struggles. I can't tell you the number of times I've been beaten down and just wrecked from life. And that's part of it, right? That's part of the fun of it. But we're supposed to have incredible highs. We're supposed to have incredible lows because it makes you appreciate both sides of that.
It's about picking yourself up.
It is.
Right.
And mixed martial arts is a fantastic way to teach that in a very safe environment, where you're being coached with peers.
Yeah. And there's I'm pretty open about this, but, a couple of years ago, I found myself just very, very depressed, right? And when you feel being that low and you can work your way out of it, and it took a couple of years. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's no easy endeavor, but once you've tasted being that low and you see that you can actually carry yourself out of it, you're able to endure other challenges and other bouts and all that stuff. And one of the, factors in me climbing my way out of that depression was Stoic philosophy. So Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. And there's an author these days named Ryan Holiday, who he writes these books about Stoicism and kind of makes it in a little more digestible and content. And he wrote a book that changed my life, was called "Obstacle is the Way," and it takes the Stoic philosophy and teaches that hey, you can look at a challenge and say, man, that's going to be rough, that's going to be tough, I can't do it, whatever. You could look at it that way, or the Stoics would say you can look at that as an opportunity to have a win, right? Like the obstacle it's not an obstacle that you avoid. It's actually the direction you want to go, because if you can overcome that, you are going to be so much stronger. And I always talk about how some of the happiest people I know, one, my mother, right? She's a super high energy, happy person. I mean, she was in a refugee camps for 12 months. She was on a rickety, fishing boat with 100 people on it, look like, as she describes it, ants on a piece of candy on the floor, just fleeing their country, out. Motor went out. You have Thai pirates coming up and taking women and taking jewelry and absolute insanity. She overcame it, right? And now, out of everyone I know, she's the happiest, most high spirit person that I know. And it really is that concept of obstacle is the way. It's she tasted that low, saw that she was able to get out of it, and has that appreciation for life. Just like cancer survivors. You ever talk to a cancer survivor and they're freaking super happy because they almost died. Yeah. They overcame it. And now it's so it's just this concept that, again, I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. All I know is I've learned things over my years and can offer that advice to others. Obstacle is the Way is a fantastic book. It helps teach you that, Rocky Balboa, it's not about getting knocked down. It's about how you get, how you pick yourself up, whatever the phrase is. But, and it ringed a bell for me when you mentioned man, I've been pinned to, thousands of times, and you get freaking stronger and you learn how to pick yourself up. So
you do. In 2020, I was in New Hampshire, and I haven't told this story publicly, before. In 2020, I was in New Hampshire with, helping on the Trump campaign. And I was pushing so hard, not getting enough sleep, waking up too early in the morning, and just working my butt off. So much so that my mind and my spirit kept going, but my body stopped, right? And so I was on a northbound highway in New Hampshire, and I felt my heart just kind of almost give up in a way, right? It started pounding profusely, and I got lightheaded, and I realized, hey, something serious is going on here. So I pulled over. I was on the phone with my then girlfriend, now my wife, and she's like, Cole, you need to get to, some medical help. You need to go. And so long story short, ended up in the hospital, and it was just short of a heart attack. But my body wasn't keeping up with my mind and my spirit. But today, after going through an incredible low like that, and especially one where you're in a scary situation where you're sitting in a hospital, but you don't know what's going on, right? You start to appreciate life so much more, right? It's those incredible lows in life that make you appreciate even the mundane of having a coffee in the morning and just waking up and seeing the beautiful sky and saying, man, I am blessed to be where I am today. If more men can do that, can look at it that way, can put themselves through incredible challenges, maybe some incredible challenges happen to them and they don't find them, they don't seek them out, they will appreciate life so much more. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
That's right.
That's what life's about, right?
That's right.
Life isn't about, and man, Jordan Peterson, he talks about this too, where a lot of people think that life is about pleasure. Life's not actually about pleasure. That shouldn't be your ultimate goal.
Right.
There's a lot of pleasure in life, don't get me wrong, and there are opportunities where you can enjoy pleasure, right? But life's actually about responsibility. And if you pick that as your ultimate goal, you're going to, pick a rewarding career, right? That may be difficult many times, but is rewarding and fulfilling, right? A marriage. Not every day is fantastic. Not every conversation is fantastic, but it is a net positive, right? And folks like yourself, you are building a brand for yourself. You're hustling. You're doing something where, politics can get pretty freaking toxic, right? And running a business gets, difficult, but it's rewarding and fulfilling. You've pursued responsibility, right? You felt responsible as a man and as a citizen in this state to do something about all the chaos that we're seeing around us, which I, admire and I think is a good example for other young men. The alternative path where I think a lot of people go wrong is when they pursue pleasure, right? If you think life's all about pleasure, go drink all day, smoke weed, rip cocaine, hookers, junk food. Sure, that is all awesome in the moment, right? Like immediate gratification, but is incredibly destructive. And if you pursue that, you're going to find yourself 300 pounds, like not happy, miserable, and maybe even want to then take your life at that point.
Right.
Like, pleasure is we experience it as men, but it is not your North Star. Maybe, and I don't know where this came from, but maybe it's that whole hyper affluence in our society. People don't want to work. They are entitled to things. They think that, oh man, well, I don't want to have to argue with another human, so I'm just not going to get married. I don't want to have to deal with fights and have to make sacrifices, so I won't go get a job and find a career. So just again, something that kind of came to mind to me that, I think you're doing the right stuff. I think I'm doing the right stuff. We're not perfect. We make our own mistakes. And that's what life is, right? That's what it means to be a man. But pick a direction, pursue excellence, and hustle, right?
You're spot on. And if I can give any practical advice to, folks, it's really going to come down to this. If you don't want to pursue the uncomfortable, okay, at least pursue something exciting. By exciting, I mean something that actually wakes you up in the morning and gives you a larger purpose. Whatever that is, whether it's building the tattoo business, whether it's pursuing a degree at university. I don't care what it is. Pursue something that's exciting to you and that gets you up out of the bed in the morning. And you're going to find a lot of times the exciting thing is also the most uncomfortable thing in the world. But coming out on the other side of that, man, it feels so good. And there's such a sense of accomplishment. You talk about your mom. I can't think of a more horrible situation to go through than what you just described. But your mom coming out on the other side of that makes her appreciate every single day that she gets on this planet.
Totally.
Such a thing that I wish I could tell my younger self is just go pursue the most exciting thing at the time.
Yeah. And it is a good piece of advice, right? Because especially if I was talking to, 15-year-old Lee, I'm not going to pick, at the time I thought life was about pleasure. It's like, well, why work harder than you need to?
Right.
Why, I used to think, and again, I grew up fairly secular, but I used to think, why not lie? Why not cheat? Why not steal? Why not do all this stuff that if you can get away with it, there's no consequences. There are consequences of that stuff, I've learned, what I mean? So, and I love that you kind of summarized that like advice to, others, young men, what you wish you could tell your, your old self.
Right.
And I guess in that same realm, like if you were to, think about what you would do differently, knowing what you know now, like what would that be, talking to your younger self?
Man, I would tell myself to commit first, figure out the rest later. It's a great quote from Grant Cardone, one of the most successful real estate entrepreneurs and
Sales
moguls. Sales as well, right? 10X rule. But he talked about that in his book. Commit first, figure out the rest later. So many times in life, I thought, man, I would love to get to this point B, maybe even point Z, but I don't know all the different steps to get there. One of the best ways I've heard this described to me is washing a car and really selling the car. How do you sell a car? I don't know. I know how to wash a car, though. I know how to vacuum a car. I know how to take pictures of a car. I know how to list the car on Facebook. I know how to have someone show up to the house with some cash and hand it over. I know how to sign a car note. I guess I know how to sell a car, right? Mm-hmm. But if you just commit, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and start vacuuming it today. I'll figure out the rest as I go. Man, so many times in life, if I just knew that, man, I could probably be at a better place right now, but I still don't regret it because I learned it along the way, right? And if you just commit first, figure out the rest later, life is so much more fun.
Small incremental steps, right? And I always reference books that, helped, get me out of depression, let's say, but there's a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about how life's all about these small micro habits that eventually lead to greatness and eventually lead to, whatever your objective is. And, if I'm talking to someone who's 400 pounds and they're miserable, they're depressed, they don't have a relationship, they don't have a job, they can't freaking do anything.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to go become an MMA fighter tomorrow. I'm not even asking you to go walk a mile. Just get out of bed. And if you can't get out of bed, then move your limbs, take the smallest steps. Once you've achieved that, then you can start to, okay, hey, I can get out of bed. Maybe I'm going to go walk to the living room. Great, you've accomplished that. Okay, now I'm going to go walk outside the house, 20 feet, walk back. You've accomplished that, walk around the block. You've accomplished that, go do a mile. All of a sudden, you're going from 400 pounds to 300 pounds to 200 pounds, and you're actually making a difference. So you don't, and hey, maybe it takes 2 years. That's rough, and we would all love to snap our fingers and be super buff and be freaking, loaded with money, and, whatever it may be, but that's not how life works, right? So it's these small incremental steps, and, I think, again, Jordan Peterson talks about that, clean your room. You have control over your own room. You can, make your bed if it's too hard to clean your room. Start with these small steps, keep at it, stay consistent, commit to it, and you will eventually be able to find, prosperity in that realm.
You will. You will. And, you gave a great example there of the person just moving their limbs in the bed, right? But at the end of that journey, I think they probably healed more of their mind than they did their body, right? They accomplished something absolutely difficult, something fantastic, and something that they can look back on and say, hey, if I was able to accomplish this, the rest of my life is pretty easy. And I can just continue to succeed in other parts of my life, whether it's a career, whether it's a relationship, whether it's friends, whether it's community, whatever it is. If I already did something so much harder, I believe in myself. I can get it done. Let's do it today.
Yeah, I love that. And so I guess similar to, you offered advice to young, Americans, which is something I always like to ask folks. So I guess, and this could be a kind of a good area to wrap up, let's say. What would your hopes and dreams be for the future of America, and then advice to young Americans seeking purpose?
Such a great question. I would love to see a country that is united again. We talk about some of the great tragedies of our country. We talk about Pearl Harbor. We talk about 9/11. I can't think of a more unified America after some of those situations, right? I would love to see an America that's that united, that patriotic, without having to go through that great tragedy. I would love to see an America that has common sense in it. Common sense, in my view, conservatism, traditional family values, one that values the nuclear family. I think that can solve a lot of the issues that we see in today's society. But when we get really down to it, the goal of not only, what I've written down in my book, but what I continue to spread to friends, family, and community members is just the idea of hope. Things can get better. They really can. There's good people out there doing good things, and just jump on board with them. Become a part of that movement. If you support good people, good community around you, you're going to notice life gets a lot better. They get a lot better for not only you, but for other people around you. So be a part of something bigger than yourself, especially if you're a young man listening today. Find something that you can push, that you can be a part of, that you can grow, that's bigger than just your individual.
Oh, I love it, man. Where can people find you? Social media, website, I'll include all the links, of course, but where can people find you, and what type of things and events can they be excited for your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always find me on X, formerly Twitter, at Cole_Marting. My website is colemarting.com, where you can find my latest opinions. I'm always putting out opinions in local media, newspapers, and whatnot. And that's also where you can find my book as well. Otherwise, come hang out with me in San Diego, right? Be a part of something bigger than yourself. And if you need a place to go, I welcome you to not only the San Diego Young Republicans, but the California Young Republicans as well.
Oh, love it, man. Well, as an American and as a Californian and as a San Diegan, I appreciate all the efforts that you're doing. I think as a man, I respect what you're doing in terms of your hustle, your brand, taking care of your wife, loving your family, loving this country. So I admire you, I respect you, and I am excited to, for my viewers to learn more about you and follow you in your journey.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, brother.
Sometimes